In this video, I'm going to show you how to create and manage quotes in Tally accounts. Firstly, before we start generating quotes, I'm going to go through to the settings menu and show you how to go through the various options. If we click into settings, just scroll down to configuration settings and you'll see on the right hand side you've got quote settings. If you click into here, the first thing you're prompted to do is you can change the name. So by default it's called a quotes module, but you can rename it to anything you want. So if this is actually going to be estimates, I could just go and rename to estimates, and then if I save the settings, you can now see it's changed to estimates on the left hand side of the screen. So you can use this module however you see fit. I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to relabel it back to quotes, and it will just change back when I hit save. We can also put the due date fields in here. So I've got valid for 30 days in here. Reference number, so I want it to show quote reference number, so I can rename that depending on what reference I want to appear on there. We can also choose if we want to remove the totals from the bottom. So we can just set this per estimate basis, so that'll give us an extra button if we want to. We can also say every time we convert a quote to an invoice, what do we want to change that category to? So I can say every time I convert it, mark that quote as closed won. We can also choose to copy the reference across onto the purchase order field on an invoice, or we could copy it across as just an extra reference line on an invoice as well, so we can tally those two transactions together. By default, the system is set up to automatically delete quotes once they've been converted to an invoice, but if you want to keep all of the quotes in the system even if you've won them for future reference, you just untick that box and then hit save. We will now see it's converted back to quotes on the left hand side of the screen. If you click into the quotes module on the left, we've got none listed in there at the moment, but before we set them up we might want to change our quote categories. So if you click categories in the top right, these are the default categories we've got. We can add new ones in just by clicking the add button. So I'm just going to say, well, this is going to be an open quote, and then you can change the flag that you want to assign to that, and once you've done that, just hit save. I'm going to add one more in, and I'm just going to say, right, this is closed and this is lost on price, and I'll set that as a red flag and then hit save. So you can have as many of these categories as you want. If I close that down now, we can now start creating quotes. If we come into the quotes module, you'll have the ability to create a quote from here. Alternatively, when you go to the front dashboard, so as soon as you log into Tally accounts, you'll have the option at the top where it says create invoice. If you click on this drop down arrow, you will have the ability to create a quote from here. Alternatively, if you go to the customers module and click into a customer record, you can create a quote directly from the customer record, and if you do it from here, this will basically bring through the customer's details straight away. Alternatively, you will just choose the customer it's for from the drop down box. This is defaulted to quote number 1 because it's the first one we've ever done, but if you're already doing quotes within your business and you've started using Tally accounts, you can just change the number in here, and then the next one I create will be 101. We can then put any reference we want in here, and that will copy through onto an invoice if I've won the business. It's brought through their address from their customer record, the date, today's date, but I can go change that date as and when needed. The category, so again our open and close categories have now come through on here. I'm just going to say this is an open quote, and if we're using multi-currency we can choose the currency we want this in. If I add a line item onto here, we can see it goes to my sale of goods, quantity 1, and I can just free type whatever I want in here, so work to be carried out in bathroom, and then I can either put in the net rate and it will calculate the VAT for me, or I can just go and add in the gross amount and it will calculate the net rate with the VAT. We can see down here it's broken out the subtotal, so it's and our VAT and our total in here, and we've got the option whether we want to remove that from the actual quote itself. If you've got multiple lines that you want to add, you can just keep on adding lines to this and add more information in. Alternatively, you could just free type into this description field, and there's no limits to the amount of characters you can have in there. You can also click on comment and just free type any information in here, so you can type whatever you want into here, and you can move how you want this to be laid out. And once you've done your quote, all you do is just hit save in the top right hand side, and that quote has now been saved in the system. So if we now go to the quotes module, we'll see a number of all of our quotes, the customer, the references, the categories, and also the date and values. You just hit create to create a new quote, and that will create a new one in the system. Alternatively, you can just click into an existing quote, and then at the top you've got the option to copy. So I could copy that across, and I'm just going to copy that to a new quote, and we say we did a similar quote for a different customer. We can see it's gone to number 101, so I can just change my reference in here and then hit save. And now we'll see when we go to quotes, 2 quotes are now listed for 2 separate customers. You can edit quotes as and when you need to just by clicking into the quote, and you've got an edit button at the top of the screen. So if I click edit, I can amend any details. So actually we did that for £900 and I don't need that additional line, so I can just cross that down, tidy up the details and then hit save. And those amendments have been made within the system, and the change has been made to the quote. The quotes are stored against the customer record, so if you go into customers and go through to 5 points, we will see under invoices and stats that quote number 100 is in here for £900. I can actually click into that from here and it will drill me straight into the quote. At the bottom of the screen we can add notes and files to this for any other information we want to store. And we've also got the option to email and print. If I print it, it will just print it off as a PDF. If I email it, it will just bring up the email editor. So it's got their email address already in there. It's got my quote from General Plumbing Electrics in there. And then I can go and add any other information I want. And then if I click on the quote, it's got my details in here. It's got my address, it's got their details, it's got the quote number, VAT number, and it's got all of the details and the quote value in there. And that will just email straight across to the customer and they'll receive that in their inbox. You can add more customer information to here, so you can add additional emails, and you can also BCC yourself or CC a colleague into these emails directly from the system. If the customer then decides to go ahead, all you need to do is click the Convert to Invoice button at the top of the screen. If we convert to an invoice, it will prompt you to say you're sure you want to do this. If you click OK, we will now see that it's converted it to invoice number 1. And if we go to our invoice list, we can see it's now an invoice, and the purchase order reference, it's copied across our quote reference in there as well. If we now go to the quotes module, we will see that that quote has been marked as closed won. Also, if we go through to the dashboard, we'll be able to see from our front dashboard we have a quote summary, so I can see my status in here. I've got one quote that's closed won, and I can see the total in there, and you can choose whether or not you want to include VAT in these values or not, so you can start analysing out your quote categories. And that's how easy it is to start setting up and generating and managing quotes using Tally accounts.